Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwar Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. I'm excited about today's podcast. I think it's beautiful and incredible, and we live in a remarkably exciting time. And so we'll go into details about that and this whole phase transition that's going to be taking place in the next 6 months and then beyond. Before we get into it, though, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Asheville, North Carolina, just right over that mountain there, not far from here at all, is still, having a lot of troubles. There's no drinkable water. And they don't think, depending on who they say it's possible to have it by Christmas, but I think it's doubtful. Others are saying there won't be any drinkable water in Asheville until August. So we'll see. Politicians, I saw something on YouTube. Scotty, I saw it just last night, actually, where there was a senator, I think it was from North Carolina, who was talking about the situation and how these people need help in Asheville and in the area, Clyde and Canton and all over, western North Carolina. And the politicians are basically, I don't think resulted recently or not, but according to this podcast, excuse me, they're still in a deadlock about where to get money to help this area. And, some want to take it from the funding for Ukraine, others want to take it from the Green New Deal, and others, it's just, so it's so ironic and tragic, really, that they can't even figure out where to access the funds to give this desperately needed help. So anyway, that's politics. Some interesting developments with respect to healthcare, fascinating. And the RFK looks like he's going to be at the forefront of making all these changes. Do you know that I guess the FDA has just approved 500 more additives, basically chemical additives, to the food, to our foods, and then there's additional 500 more that are allowed, but they say, they don't really need FDA approval because they've been around. And there's no secret that the increase of obesity is exponential, and the food is just riddled with chemicals and that. So it looks like all that's going to change. And in a previous podcast, I think the last podcast, I talked about peptides a little bit. And since then, I found it was interesting that RFK has made a list of things he wants to change in the health industry. And number one, I think on the list, he had stem cell. And I don't know enough about stem cells to comment on the wisdom of that or how far along it is. But number two is peptides. And so, I think, all this gets interconnected now. But we're in that period of transition. Those of you who've been listening to the podcast know this full well. Into a period of Sat Yuga, the golden age, the age of enlightenment, that's occurring right in the middle of this Kali Yuga, which is an age of ignorance. And even just the things that RFK is talking about, it's hugely transformational. And if you look at the ancient Vedic literature, people lived hundreds and hundreds of years, you know. And the potential is there. And really, in all industries, not just healthcare, but if you just look, sciences of in all areas are the knowledge is there, the technology is there. It's just a matter of unleashing it, and I think you're going to see all that. You will. You're going to start to see all of that now, slowly starting to manifest, and then as things transition really into this period of Sat Yuga, and that transition, as I've been saying for a long time, should happen probably somewhere in the middle of 2025. And it's not going to be all like all of a sudden presto changeo, and everybody's enlightened and all. But we're going to see significant changes starting to take shape around that time. And at the same time, it's said that it will be like a sawtooth curve. In other words, you've got the status quo going along, then all of a sudden there's going to be a moment of that. It's like when water finally turns to ice. There's that transition period, but then the crystallization. And that crystallization moment, it's like a sawtooth curve where everything just shifts dramatically upward. And we're going to see that over the next year. Now, that's just the foundation. The foundation will crystallize. But it'll take time, and gradually, before we see the fullest blossoming of the 1,000-year period of Sat Yuga that we're entering, we'll see it move more and more into the blossoming throughout the 1,000 years, really. But it'll be a few hundred years before we see the maximum value of Sat Yuga for this period. That's still going to only be maybe 70 or 80% of full Sat Yuga, because after all, we're still in Kali. But it's going to be huge. And that transition is happening. Right now, less than 40% of the people under age 40, at least in the United States, say they are not religious. 40% say they are, so 60% say they're not. That's so fascinating to me. Of course, I distinguish between religious and spiritual, and see, all that's going to get straightened out. Even the understanding of what religion is, that it's half spiritual and half cultural, and all that's going to change. And the understanding of spirituality even is going to deepen, because a lot of the quotes and things that you hear now that are commonly said about religion, one being one with God or what have you, the mechanic of that, the physics, if you will, of that will be more clearly understood. And that in and of itself is going to put people in a position where they say, oh, okay, well, now I get it. And okay. So all that's happening. But now the transition into Sat Yuga, you can actually already start to see some signs of it in that the world, it's not just, in the United States, but in the world, people are getting fed up. They're getting fed up with the ridiculous mentality, that the twisted lens that people are viewing the world through, our world leaders are viewing the world through. And so things are shifting to a point where people are not going to put up with it anymore. And we're going to see that transition into a era that makes sense. And really, what does make sense even mean? Make sense, well, what is even sense? Sense means feeling. Sense, feeling what? Feeling into the depth of your being. What is the depth of your being? Nature, Mother Nature, what we call the Veda, the true nature of existence, the foundational purity of existence is nature. the fishbowl after it's been cleaned. You see, uh, everything now is moving in that direction. And what it will look like as it more and more fully blossoms, let's talk about Sat Yuga a little bit. Well, for one, we'll see pollution, disease, all that stuff is going to fall by the wayside. You're not going to see it anymore. Health will prosper, longevity will prosper, negative behavior, evil, petty greed, things like that, all that's going to go away. We're looking at a golden age in a common sense, practical age at the same time. And it's happening, and it's incredible. Just like Lord Krishna predicted and told Mother Divine 5,000 years ago, said in 5,000 years, we're going to have an enlightened period. And that is what's happening, the golden age, Sat Yuga in the midst of Kali Yuga. It's all happening. And then there was that astrologer, that Jyotishi, who came along, I told you, in the 90s. And I published an article by him in one of the previous few podcasts. And what did he say? He said, it's kind of far out, but he said the golden age will begin, Sat Yuga will begin when a man with orange hair is president of the United States. Well, that fits perfectly into what we've been saying time-wise. Now, some people are going to, right now, certainly, some people are going to say, well, if that's true, it's in spite of him being president, not because. And others will, of course, say, no, it's because. Take whatever position you want, because in a short period of time, it's not going to matter anyway. A golden age is coming, period. Now, let's take a look at Sat Yuga. Let's take a step back, and you see, there are Maha Yugas. Maha Yugas are made up of all four yugas. It's the whole big cycle, and we go from one yuga to the next, to the next, to the next, and then the whole cycle starts over. And so, right now we're in Kali, and even though we're going to be experiencing a period of essentially Sat Yuga in the midst of Kali, when that ends, we're going to go into the next Maha Yuga, which starts with Sat Yuga. And that's when you see, and it's really interesting how the evolution of species, even from Darwin, you can see how it sort of parallels what we're going to see with the onset and the unfoldment of Sat Yuga in the next Maha Yuga, and how it was in the beginning of this Maha Yuga as well. And that is that it starts with a fish incarnation, Lord Vishnu. Now, what do we mean by Lord Vishnu? We mean an embodiment of total knowledge, of pure knowledge. See, Lord Vishnu is like the full spectrum, not just the absolute, but the absolute as in its nature as it permeates all different levels of relativity. You could say it that way. If you wanted to, and we could debate this back and forth and go into this in detail, but if you wanted to, you could say Shiva is the pure absolute. Vishnu is the pure absolute, including the whole structure of relativity in its most divine sense, and that's Vishnu. So at any rate, the first incarnation of Vishnu in the beginnings of the Sat Yuga, pure Sat Yuga period, is a fish incarnation. And you can read about the different incarnations if you want, and it leads up to then there's the incarnation that's half man and then a dwarf. And so what was going on in Sat Yuga before human beings, before the incarnation of the dwarf and like that? That's when human beings started. In the beginning there were no human beings. And that's where this stuff is unimaginable. And even talking about it, in addressing it to people who are really identified with a particular paradigm, in a particular worldview that they can't see past, well, they're going to hear this and it's just like too far out, you know. But the reality is it is cognized, it is historical. And so just imagine it's not mythology. Just for a little bit, imagine it's not mythology. And so what we have is then we have the gods. And what are the gods? They're the laws of nature. Then we have the Asuras. What are the Asuras? The Asuras are like uh, more emphasis not on the universality, but a little bit more the individuality. I guess you could say it that way. And so there's kind of a tug of war then between the gods and the Asuras. All that happened in the early stages of Sat Yuga. There are different things that happened there before human beings existed in the early stages of Sat Yuga. But what gets interesting that at one point human beings start to emerge, evolution of species, if you will, start to emerge within Sat Yuga around the time of the dwarf incarnation. And then it's the human beings. Now, this is very interesting, actually. The human beings are the ones that perform, technologies of the unified field. Pujas, havans, ceremonies, if you will, but they're not just made up ceremonies, they're actual technologies to enliven the divinity within relativity. In other words, to worship the gods, if you want to put it that way. And so the gods start to become more powerful. And of course, then that goes into a sort of an imbalance with the Asuras, which you don't dig it because now you got human beings and gods, and that's kind of taking on more power. And then what happens then is that the Asuras, it starts to transform. And what happens then is that we start to see their development, if you will, lack of a better word, into that's where the Rakshasas come from. And Rakshasas are like even more individualized, even more, that's where selfishness and greed and things like that start to creep in. And that's because you see, it's very interesting, really, because prior to that time, there were no human beings in the early stages of Sat Yuga. There were no temples and there was no need for them because everything was perfect, you know. But now with the advent of this whole dynamic going on, then that's when the human beings come along and they start building temples which maintain the purity of the knowledge, enliven the connection with divinity, with the gods. And so now, fast forward to this current time, we're entering this period of Sat Yuga, and that's when it's going to be really important. See, first it was really important to build the Panchayatan and Mount Soma, the enlightened city, all that, just to help bring about a smooth transition. We did what we could, others did what they could, and it's appearing that the transition is going to be, relatively smooth, certainly in contrast to an Armageddon, which it could have been. But now what's going to happen is the enlightened city and the completion of the enlightened city, which we're working on, that sort of thing. Those things are going to help and be essential, really, in maintaining and energizing, if you will, Sat Yuga right in the midst of Kali Yuga. So it's really important we continue doing the work that we're doing. In Sat Yuga, you see, echoes of truth are no longer going to be perceived as truth. I can say that it's one of the things I teach, echoes of truth perceived as truth, hold truth at bay. Well, that's not going to go on anymore. People in Sat Yuga are going to see truth for what it is, and they're not going to get distracted by the echoes of truth that throw distortion into the whole thing. Also, this transition, it's going to happen through people. A common thing people say to me is, oh, yes, well, with the will of Shiva or whatever, it'll all work out. And I say, yes, but Shiva works through people. So it's not like we can just kick back and say, oh, great, the enlightened age is coming. It's not how it works. It's going to feel like we're bringing these things forward through our own volition, because that's how nature works. It's working through us. It's working through people. And I've talked about cleaning the fishbowl, basically all there is to it is the fishbowl is going to get cleaned, meaning the fishbowl is that analogy to global consciousness. As global consciousness clears, all these things are going to happen. And Sat Yuga is going to be beyond what we can even really imagine. Even the part of Sat Yuga where there are human beings, let alone pre-human, But no more disease. Longevity will be extended dramatically. No more suffering. Desires will be spontaneously fulfilled, and they'll be in harmony with nature. People will have the cities, the supernatural powers, things that we can't even imagine, we can't even believe. We view it as mythology oftentimes in this day and age. But all of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and the manifestation of them, all that's going to happen. And so we live in such an exciting age to have the opportunity to witness this transition. I mean, it doesn't happen once every how many million years, And so consider yourself fortunate. We're here to witness this. We're here with the opportunity to witness this. People will live in harmony with the Shastras, the Upangas, with their own dharma, their own right action. What does that mean? Action in harmony with their own true nature, their true nature, their nature as it emerges through them as individuals from the absolute all the way to the surface of their being. So all that is happening. They say the only insects that will exist are the honeybee. There will be no storms. Rain will come as just a light mist in the early wee hours of the morning. They say that the world needs two poles to spin around. So it's not like everywhere on the whole planet is going to be enlightened all at once. There'll be pockets. Some areas will be, more evolved than others, certainly. In the full glory of Sat Yuga, which may not even happen when we're living 70 to 80% of it during the next 1,000 years, but in the next Maha Yuga, there's a time. See, they say that in Kali Yuga, Rakshasas dwell inside of people, inside of their own psyche. That doesn't mean they think they're evil. They think they're right. So Rakshasas dwell inside of people. And then what happens is, as things evolve and stuff through the next yugas, they don't exist in other yugas. They don't exist within people. They might exist in the forest, in the deep forest, somewhere over the rainbow. What is that? With a wicked witch who lives deep in the forest. And then as time goes by, they don't even live on the same continent. They live on an island or some other continent. And then in pure, full-blown, absolute Sat Yuga, they don't even exist on the planet. They exist somewhere else. What we're going to see then is also we're going to start to see, and this is a few hundred years off, but immortals will be walking the earth, divine beings and truly enlightened beings, more than just Brahman consciousness, which will be common. But that time when the entire physiology is pure like crystal. In Brahman consciousness, the awareness can be enlightened, but you're still living in a body of mud. The time's coming when there are going to be people walking the earth whose bodies are crystal and they're like glass, they're pure, they're divine. Things will happen that we can't even imagine, and even hearing about it, it's like can't accept it. It's just too far out. And I've talked about that. There could be great saints living hidden away in caves that no one can find, that will come out of those caves and start intermingling with the people. When things get that's the thing, there's such a limited understanding, like, for example, UFOs. It's in the Veda, it's all explained. And when Kali Yuga starts, a lot of the really great saints and stuff will go up into the Himalayas and live in the cave and have nothing to do with the world for a while. They'll even go to another planet and live there until the fishbowl gets cleaned. I mean, who wants to live in the polluted fishbowl, you know? So all this is happening, and as incredible as it may seem, and I have to admit, I have some reservations even talking about this on a podcast because so many people are going to just, that's too far out, you know? But I have to say what I know, and it's not just coming from me. It's right in the Veda. The people out there, pundits know all about it. It's there, and it's knowledge. It's not just opinion, it's knowledge. And it came right from the cognitions of the rishis, the enlightened seers. I think that pretty much covers it, Scotty, unless you have something to add or questions or anything.
No, I think you got it.
All right. All right, everybody. You might want to listen to this one more than once. And if you're having a hard time with it, you know, I mean, this is a really different understanding of life and existence than how we've been brought up to believe. But as I've said many times, the world is not as we've been led to believe. So there it is, and I hope you receive it well. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next time on Ancient Secrets of Real.